Welcome everybody to the Beyond College workshop. Today we are going to focus on tips of the trade, how to build a winning resume. This is the part where it gets really exciting, especially as all of you are starting to get started for those jobs, internships, fellowships. You're all getting ready to get out of here. So we're going to help you prepare for that. So first I want to thank our friends at Wells Fargo for joining us today and for offering their expertise to everybody. I'm very excited about what we have to offer and to help all of you as you move your journey from the classroom to hopefully the corporate boardrooms. So as you start that journey, we're going to help you prepare for that. So I should first start with who I am. I am Caroline Harper. I am Dr. Caroline Harper from the Jackie Robinson Foundation. And on the next slide, you'll know a little bit about us and what we do. We actually are established in 1973, and our goal really was to honor our namesake. And that was both Jackie Robinson, but also he and his wife got together to start this foundation specifically so that we can help young adults as they move forward from home into communities, into classrooms, and from classrooms and beyond, and to be successful in all of those spaces. So we've been doing this since 1973, and we are, in fact, one of the leading organizations who administers scholarships across the board to young people, particularly minority and underrepresented students across the board, at all institutions, at HBCUs, at Ivy Leagues, at public institutions and smaller private institutions. Across the board, we represent all institutions. And so in addition to our scholarship program, we have also launched the JRF Impact Program, which is a virtual community to meet students where they're at, and again, to prepare you for the college experience, in addition to our museum, which just opened a few months ago. So we are excited about that. But again, through the museum, through Impact, through JRF Scholars, all of these collectively, we work very hard to actually empower students and empower communities. We are unbelievably successful at this. We have given $95 million in grants and programs over the years. We have a 98% scholar graduation rate and more than 5,000 students. So we are very excited with what we do. And with that, I am actually going to introduce our first friend from Wells Fargo. He is in fact a student athlete who graduated from UNC Charlotte. And from then he actually did make this transition as well from the classroom into the corporate environment. And he has served in several roles in the 25 years that he has been at Wells Fargo. He is now the person who is running a lot of their HBCU initiatives, but he is also the Senior Lead Diversity and Inclusion Consultant. He is Dewey Norwood.
Dr. Harper, Dewey Norwood is having some technical difficulties.
Okay.
We're going to ask Tamika Lindsay to come on in his place for just a second.
Absolutely.
Just one moment, please.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having me today. As you can see, Wells Fargo has a long-standing commitment to our customers and communities. There are 1.9 trillion in assets that we proudly serve in 3 of USA households, more than 10% of small businesses across the US. So there, again, long-standing history, commitment to our customers. We have a diversified set of banking and investment mortgage products that we are continuing to refine based on the needs of our customers. We are in the communities that we serve. We are truly showing up in places that are innovative as far as supporting our housing affordability measures, small business growth, financial health, truly in a low carbon economy. So there are so many things that Wells Fargo is doing, all concentrating on our customers and our business partners, and certainly welcoming you today to this conversation and looking forward to finding innovative ways that we can continue to grow our footprint and help customers grow their business dreams and goals as well. So now Dewey is back in place, we see.
Yep. Tamika, thank you so much for the pinch hit there. It's always fun with technology, right? This is the reason you have multiple devices and multiple ways to connect in. This is resilience. Scholars, this was the test of resilience. Can I be fast enough to get back to another device that we know can connect in some way, shape, or form? So again, on behalf of the Wells Fargo team, excited to be on. Do want to spotlight just a little bit about the work that we're doing around our higher education areas. And what's significant and something that's really to be celebrated is the $110 million that the firm has provided supporting higher education organizations, great organizations that you see on the screen, and of course the amazing work of the Jackie Robinson Foundation as well. But in that number, team also includes $34 million of financial support specifically for HBCUs. And so significant investments that were made in those areas, and certainly looking to have those numbers continue to grow in the days ahead. So some pretty important work happening there. Hey, we always love to spotlight, and again, Tamika, thanks for those intros there a moment ago. Always love to spotlight some work. I hope that many of you all had an opportunity last weekend to tune into the CIAA basketball tournament that was taking place. It's exciting to note that Wells Fargo is now the official banking sponsor of the Central Intercollegiate Athletic Association, or the CIAA. You can actually scan the QR code that's on the page to learn more about the work that we're doing across that amazing organization and the great things that are happening there. I think we got one more slide here that's going to spotlight another area, and this is actually for one of our partners, an organization called Our Money Matters. I would encourage everyone that's on with us today, scan that QR code, learn more about the OMM team and the work that they're doing from a community perspective, and specifically the areas of focus they have around financial health and financial wellness for scholars. Just visit ourmoneymatters.com or simply hit that QR code to be able to learn more in those kinds of areas. So some really, really exciting things happening there. So huge shout out to our friends at OMM and of course the CIAA. All right, as we continue on with things here, we kind of touched on the welcome. Dr. Harper reminded us at the top of the call that we are recording today. And so special thanks to anyone that may be listening to the playback, and certainly give us any feedback that you have for anyone that's listening to the playback of this amazing session. From a numbers perspective, you all know this is one of my favorite parts of the broadcast. We always like to go in and spotlight some of the top universities and top partners that are connecting in. And I think today that Arizona State University is actually our #1 referral source here. We also have Berkeley College that's also connecting in with us as well. We've got great representation across the Cal system. We've got our friends at CUNY York. I see some of our HBCU scholars joining us from Morehouse and from Hampton. We've got Morgan State, MSU, also in the house with us today. North Carolina A&T joining, and also great connectivity across the University of Maryland. And also the University of Minnesota. We've even got a campus partner joining us all the way from the University of the Virgin Islands. And so special thanks to all of those students that are joining in. And just thanks for being willing to join into this important discussion. Hey, what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to discuss it. We're talking about Resume Writing 101. You're going to hear from a recruiter's perspective, the things that they are looking for. We're also going to give you some do's and don'ts. There are some things that are good to do and other things that you may not want to do relative to your resume. So we'll unpack some of those areas. We'll also give you some action words and some power words that you need to be thinking about. And then we're going to also do a comparison here of the before and after, maybe what a resume looks like early on, and maybe some ways that you can kind of tweak it and adjust it to make it better. Don't forget, we've got the Q&A components of things. As always, our great partners, the Jackie Robinson Foundation, will be facilitating the Q&A portion of the discussion. Please remember, scholars, if you submit a question via the chat, we will see your name and information, but if you submit them to Dr. Harper and the team, either via email or through other means, we'll be able to submit those confidentially. But we'll never call your name out on the broadcast, but please submit those questions, because if it's top of mind for you, it's probably top of mind for another scholar or someone that's listening to the playback. When we get to the end, we'll give you some reminders. And in the days ahead, you're actually going to be able to access playback for our other sessions that we've conducted so far this year. Hey, and get social with us. Use those hashtags for the Jackie Robinson Foundation, and then at hashtag WFC Beyond College. All right, I think we've covered off on the major items. Enough of Norwood talking and getting his phone connected. Let's get to the real stars of today's broadcast. And I'm excited that we have with us today Ruth Armandades and then also Ayanna Collins. I'm going to encourage everyone that's on with us today, to please scan the QR codes that you see there, jump out, get connected to these amazing leaders, and let's look forward to what's going to be a really, really exciting discussion. Ayanna, thank you so much for being on. I know that you and Ruth have some amazing items to share, so I'm going to go off of camera and go on mute and let you all take over from here.
Great. Thank you so much. So we'll just start off with introductions, and it's great to meet all of you all. Thank you so much for joining. So Ruth, if you want to start by introducing yourself, and then I'll go, and then we'll get right into the presentation.
Sounds like a plan. Hi, everyone. My name is Ruth Armandades, and I was really excited to hear that ASU is kind of leading the pack. I'm dialing in from Arizona, not an ASU alum, but you guys are just down the street. So glad to have you guys on. I've been with Wells Fargo 11 years and in financial services now for a little over 25 years. And I know you're all thinking, Holy moly. Yes, I am old enough to probably be your mom. But I have been in financial services for 25 years and fell into it by accident. I thought I was going to be a teacher. But that was a really good accident. And today, when we talk about the resume, we'll talk about kind of those things that kind of make a change in what recruiters look at. For me, it was a recruiter who I went to a workshop to kind of build my resume. And it was a recruiter who kind of took the time to give me some feedback, walk me through some things I could change, and then introduced me to a completely different career path. So know that many of you might be a freshman, you might be a sophomore, you're maybe not quite sure. Maybe you're already a junior or a rising senior and you already know what you want to do. We hope today's presentation will give you some insights on how to really tweak and maximize what you put on your resume. And we'll give you kind of the inside scoop of what we look at as far as recruiters. So recently, I was part of a national programs and partnerships team, managed external relationships. And now, because I have such a huge passion for working with our collegiate students, I'm now a senior campus recruiter. So I've been doing this now for almost 3 months. So not necessarily a newbie, because I kind of came back to campus recruiting. I did that about 10 years ago. So excited to be here today, and we're really looking forward to the questions that you guys are gonna, put us to the test. So Ayanna, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. And we share some things in common. Again, Ayanna Collins, I've been with Wells Fargo. I'm the newbie on the team. I've been with Wells Fargo for about 1.5 years now. But prior to me working at Wells Fargo, I spent 15, 20 years within consulting business, and specifically around population health management. So talk about a career shift. So I'm very knowledgeable about the number of resumes and shifting and making sure your resume really fits the type of job that you're looking for. Made the career change because I have a passion in DE&I. I have a passion, as Ruth shares, and just really reaching out and talking to collegiates and truly helping you all get started with your career. Because I know that's one of the first things that you think about when you get into school. It's like, well, what am I going to do when I graduate? And the closer you get to your senior year, the bigger that question becomes, right? Started my college career at North Carolina A&T. I heard that there was someone from A&T on the call, so Aggie Pride. And then I've made stops at Wake Forest University, and then ended at Georgia State University. So I made quite a bit of rounds within my academic career, but all of that has truly, truly prepared me for the role that I sit in, the career that I've had. The career journey has been, the successes that I've had in my career journey have really been based on the experiences and the learnings that I've got from attending all different kinds of schools with doing different kinds of majors. And so it's truly also helped me in terms of forming my resume and helping me make sure that I really stand out amongst the crowd. So speaking of that, let's just get into the presentation. So when you think about your resume, you want to think about it as your ticket to interview, right? This resume is to highlight your story. This resume should talk about you and get recruiters interested in learning more about you when you're not even in the room, right? Think of it as your first impression. What will draw the recruiter's attention? Because you have to think about it. Recruiters spend about 30 to 60 seconds looking at a resume, and that really is dependent upon the number of applications that they get. Of course, the more applications they get, the more strict they're going to be in that initial look, because especially within Wells Fargo, going into an internship, the recruiters really spend time looking at every single one of those resumes, right? So you have to make sure that you stand out and your resume looks the part. It's not hard to read, it's easy to read, it has a chronological, it shows your relevant experience chronologically, just got hung up just for a little bit. And then it really truly conveys your career advancement. What have you done since entering into college that really showcases that not only can you start a career, but you can continue on, but you will be successful at your internship or joining in as an entry-level professional. You want to ensure that that resume is tailored towards the job that you're looking for. And we'll get more into those certain keywords that you want to make sure that you have in there. The job description itself will tell you exactly what you need to put in the resume. There's really no magic about it. It's written right there in front of your face. You just have to find it, right? So we'll go to the next slide. So again, just going into a little more detail of what do the recruiters look for? So of course, formatting. That's the first thing. You don't want to have any grammatical errors. You want to make sure that the font is not extremely small and it's not overly large where you're trying to fit a small amount of work on one page. We figured it all out. We know all of the hacks. You can't trick us. So you want to make sure, again, you keep a font size of 10 to 11 points. Using a easy to read font. So no special fonts, no cursive, don't get really creative. Make sure that it's really easy to read. And also you want to make sure that it's compatible with all of the different computers and softwares that are using. So stick with the really simple ones. Don't try anything fancy. Personal information. You want to include your your permanent and school address. We want to know where do you go to school, where are you living full-time if you're not going to summer school. So where are you doing your internship? The reason we ask that is because it helps us better fit you. So like with Wells Fargo, there could be opportunities in Charlotte, it could be Minneapolis, it could be Des Moines, Iowa, it could be New York. And so just knowing where you're going to be during the summer can just help us make sure that we place you in a position where you can easily get to and from work. When you think about experience, you want to think about how do you explain your job hopping, the pattern. So if you work somewhere for just a year and then you're switching somewhere else, just kind of explain why you've kind of moved from one position to the next. You've achieved what you could at XYZ, and so you saw this new experience, and so you moved to the next job. If you don't have a lot of experience, that's when you want to start thinking about your volunteerism. You want to be intentional about your volunteer work, right? And you also want to think about when you're joining in these student organizations, what subcommittees can you lead or join that will showcase your skills? You want to showcase your project management skills. You want to showcase your time management skills, showcase technical skills, showcase anything that you participated in. If you participated in a hackathon, if you participated in some sort of research study, you want to ensure that you talk about that and not only just say, I did it, but what are some of the things that you did to improve it or to achieve success? What are some of the results, tangible results that you can put into there? So again, when you're thinking about your summer job, if you're a freshman going into your sophomore year, start thinking about what kind of experience can I get that will help me build my resume. So again, we talked about experience, we talked about leadership and activities. Just don't join an organization, really be engaged, be a part of it, and take some leadership. And at the very bottom, we want to see what you've done. We want to see your successes. So what awards and honors have you achieved? What national honor societies are you a part of? Make sure that's in there. If you've gotten any special merit recognition from teachers, from volunteers, from boards, be sure to put that in there as well. So let's get into some do's. So page limit, that's a topic of discussion. So if you don't have a lot of experience, if you haven't been working for 10 years or so, you really should be able to fit your resume in on one page. And you want to make sure that you use action verbs. And so Ruth will go into what are those action verbs, because we want to see that you've had tangible results and that you've done things. So just don't list out you were a part of this organization. Just say what you actually did. You want to have at least 2 sets of eyes on your resume to provide feedback. I don't care how many times you read through your resume, there is one grammatical error that you miss because you're so comfortable with your resume and with the page itself. So go and look, have your friend look at it, even have a teacher or someone from your career services look at it with more of that formatting eye to help you pick up on anything and see if there's anything that you might have missed. Again, include any technical skills, and you also want to make sure that you refresh it. So as you continue, when you do those courses and you're learning more things, you've worked with Python and now you've learned SAS, add that in there. Or if you've now become proficient in Excel because you've taken a couple of courses on Coursera or through some other type of online platform, add that in there. So make sure that your resume is up to date before you send it. Use data to quantify accomplishments so that, again, I achieved a 15% increase in my social media campaign that I worked with for the university, something of that nature to show that you've actually had great results. Now, the feel-good results, the qualitative results are just as good. If you don't have the quantitative, put it in there, but just be careful that, we can read through certain things and we know when it's fluff and when it's not. So if you put in the feel-good stuff, make sure that it's followed by some sort of tangible results as well. Of course, that next bullet is we catch it, we see it, be truthful on your resume. There's no fake it till you make it within corporate world. You know, we'll catch on to it. When you're saving your resume and uploading your resume, it's always great to use a PDF format. So no matter if you're using Word or if you're using Pages with your Mac system, save it as a PDF. So that way the formatting isn't changed, especially if you have bullet points and underlines and your picture somewhere. Save it as a PDF. That way we can easily read it and it's easily compatible and we're able to open it up. All right, so these are some of the do's. So let's get into the don'ts. Don't use lengthy paragraphs. So again, we have about 30 to 60 seconds to review your resume. We don't want to read through all of that. We want to ensure that we catch the highlights of all of your successes from all of the experience that you've had. There's no one size fits all resume. And if you heard from Ruth and myself from my introductions, we've had some career changes and career shifts. That one size fit all would not have helped us make that transition to our new career. So again, you have to tailor it. Within the job description, you'll see keywords that will tell you exactly what they're looking for. If you see project management, then you know from your experience, you got to highlight all the things that you've done to develop, lead, implement, and test a product that you've launched or something that you've done to manage to make sure that the project stayed on task. Again, we talked about this. Do not get fancy with formatting. Don't add a bunch of bullet points. Don't send me something where things are sliding in and sliding out, anime, because it just won't show up and it's just going to look really weird when I try and pull up and when Ruth tries to pull it up as well. Be mindful of colors and graphics. Keep it simple. Black is the best thing to use because again, formatting, it will just show up really, really well. We'd love to learn more about you. So it's not always about what you've done, but it's just, we want to know about who you are. What's your personality? What do you like to do? What are some of the things that you could potentially bring in from your hobbies and from your extracurricular activities that would be useful working in XYZ field and XYZ position? So tell us what some of your hobbies are. What are some of the things that you like to do? You run, walk, read, those kinds of things. Make sure you use your correct contact information. We can't say that enough. Double check your email, double check your telephone number, because it's nothing more frustrating than a recruiter wanting to get in touch with you but can't because your name is misspelled on your email account, or if you're waiting for a response and we've been trying to respond and that's the reason why we can't get in touch with you. Last tip, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Ruth, is to make sure if they ask for the resume, you copy and paste it into the application tool. Yes, it's double work because you're attaching your resume, but also be sure to copy and paste that resume in your application tool because again, it's looking for those keywords. And so you want to make sure that you stand out, make sure that you are making it past that first round. So these are some of the top do's and don'ts within formatting and building your resume. So Ruth, I'm going to turn it over to you. And so you can talk about formatting, words and formatting.
So words matter. So what you convey on that resume is going to position you and kind of set you apart from your peers who are all applying to the same position and have very similar experience than you have. So if we go on to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between some, compelling communication words and decision-making words. So let's just say you're a shift leader. You're working at, retail, Starbucks, fast food, and, many people would have said responsible for a team of 10. Well, it's very different from saying managing a team of 10 to leading a team of 10. So when you write your action, your bullet points, what I want you to do is not just write them out, read them out loud, because that's going to be very important, because that's how we as a recruiter were reading them and we listen to what does that say, right? So very, very different from just saying responsible for, responsible for. Responsible for kind of was the go-to on every resume, probably 20 years ago. And thankfully now, we're using more action words. So don't fall into I was responsible for, printing. And the other piece that I will say is don't dummy down your responsibilities. Okay, so you might say, well, I wasn't a shift leader, so I really wasn't leading anything. Even as an individual contributor, you can lead the work, you can set the standard, right? So whether it was, maybe you were a sales rep. So in that sales rep position, were you just selling, right? Responsible for selling products and services? Or were you influencing and increasing sales by 10%? Were you taking the lead and standing out from your peers? So what I want you to kind of think about is, as a recruiter, when we read and we read all your responsibilities, we're looking for things that are going to show leadership, initiative, critical thinking. You might wonder, well, how does critical thinking stand out in a resume? What we look at when we look at that resume is we look at to see, how did you convey it? And I can tell you, when I read a resume and if I can see that this person really took the time to use some action words, they use their critical thinking, because they're like, how can I make sure that I pull out my thesaurus and not sound like my peers and everybody else is writing the same thing? The other quick trick that you can do when using action words is, many times employers will use action words within their job description. So Yana mentioned, making sure that it's not a one resume fits all, right? So look at that job description and look to see, what are those action words? You will see that some employers will talk about strategy, working in a dynamic work environment. So sometimes I've had students say, well, what does dynamic work environment mean? Well, that constantly means there's constant change. And all of you have done that, right? You've been working in an environment where maybe you're short staff, maybe, a big rush comes in and the constant things are changing. And if you're able to convey that on a resume, you're like, wait, yeah, I work in a dynamic working environment, constant change. I have to be able to be flexible and nimble. How do I convey that on the resume? So look at the job description and then steal from the job description. Okay, just borrow all those action words and make sure that you're putting onto your resume. And I will tell you, that makes a world of difference. Ayana mentioned that recruiters spend 60 seconds looking at a resume, and you guys will be shocked because you're like, how does a recruiter look at that? Well, first of all, I will tell you, as a recruiter, I will look for the first typo and then I stop reading. So if I've noticed a typo in the first 10 seconds, your resume's out. If your resume is really wonky and kind of hard to read, I might not put you at the no, but I might put you at the bottom of my list, and maybe I'll come back to you because I'm looking for my strongest resumes. So recruiters, we knock out those weak resumes first because we know we don't have to spend more time on them, right? We've seen, there's grammatical errors, there's graphics, things that are just what we call, you're trying to cover the space. We'll talk a little bit right now about using the white space, but we know when you're trying to cover the white space with just fluff, or is it truly filling that space? So really think about what those action words are and then say them out loud, and you will notice huge difference when you're putting it onto your resume. All right, let's go on to the next slide. So we talked a little bit about action verbs, and I'm going to pause here so you guys can take a screenshot. So here, what we kind of did is we broke down little segments, right? When you led a project, right? You chaired, you controlled, you coordinated. These are things that you necessarily don't think that you did, but you're doing them, right? So you're like, yeah, I helped organize the committee, or yeah, I had to organize the sales. And these are things that you need to write down as, in our case, we think of it, it's just the work that I do. It is what it is. Well, now you have to think about it is, how do I articulate that? I sometimes do the interviewing workshops, and I always tell folks, and I want to say this to you guys because you're going to remember this. When you are interviewing and you are preparing for a job, it is like dating, right? It is your best foot forward. And guess what? If you put your best foot forward and it has a whole bunch of typos, you're probably not going to get called back for that second date, right? So as recruiters, we look at that, right? So when you think of that, how am I making that first impression? It's really about, okay, if I was reading this and I was going to hire, the other piece that I say is think like an owner. I want you guys to think, if you were the business owner, would you want to hire this person? right? Because this person now is going to represent you, right? So if you're looking at that resume, you're like, wow, it's really strong communication skills. This is probably somebody that I can put in front of my customers, and I'm not going to be embarrassed to put them in front of my customers, right? So if you think as an owner and really be truthful with yourselves, right? Because you're kind of like, what I need to work on, then you're gonna make a stronger resume. And quite frankly, when you make a stronger resume and you really put some work into it, you're going to be very confident about going into that interview. And then the other piece is you are the expert in you. When you go into that interview, you know yourself better than anyone. Granted, maybe mom and dad do, but they're not going to be part of the interview, right? But you know how to sell yourself. So sometimes writing down all your accomplishments is really that. Writing down your accomplishments. What do I want people to know? And what do I want people to know me as, right? This is really about your branding. And that resume is your branding. So all those action items, you want to be known as the person who takes action, takes direction, leads, not the person that just shows up to work. Okay. I'm just, I'm a body coming to work. I hope you hire me. I hope you can fill the 10 hours. And absolutely, sometimes we need to hire somebody who can, work on the back end and do some back work. Absolutely. But we know that not only did you guys join this session today because you want to stand apart from your peers, but we know you're working on your development. So you guys are individuals who want to work and shine. So now you're trying to see, what can I do and what can I convey? So think of it that way. You're conveying your branding on paper. And that's what recruiters look at. We look at so many resumes that, I have individuals who will ask me, well, what's the criteria you look at? And really, sometimes it's a gut, right? If I look at a resume, I can see that they took the time. I can see that they, quite frankly, sometimes I see resumes that all look the same. They use the Word template that comes with, Microsoft, which is okay. You can do that, but don't stick to just that. It should be developing as you're growing your skill sets, okay? So take a time, take a screenshot of this. This is really, really helpful. I want you guys to really pause about, what am I doing that makes me stand out, that are truly action verbs? And most of you may not be thinking you're doing it because you're like, well, I'm not quite sure that I do that. Once you take a look at every single line, and we won't read them line by line, but you definitely did, right? Whether you were auditing reports, whether you authored a report, right? Maybe you created this new ad hoc report and really streamlined a process. You might think of it as, well, it's just because I'm really good at Excel and I took the initiative and did this for the project to clean it up and ensure we got the A. Well, did you do that and your other peers could not? So really showcase that you did that and this is what you brought to the table. So those are things that we as recruiters look for. So we're going to go on to the next slide, and I'm going to show you a little bit about, we talked about really using the words and the job description. Now, what I want you guys to think about is recruiters receive such huge volume of applicants that sometimes we get candidates and we wonder, okay, what did they not read the job description? There are some job descriptions will say X amount of years of work experience. Or many times it'll say, especially for you all that maybe are applying to internships, it'll have a specific graduation date, right? So sometimes it'll say looking for rising juniors, and it'll have the parameters of what years we're looking for. Maybe we're looking for graduating seniors. And we will get individuals that are freshmen that apply to full-time positions that it clearly says a graduating senior program, a full-time program, and it's not an internship. So we want you guys to get practice applying to positions, but you want to be strategic in doing that. So really look at the job descriptions and ask yourself, do I meet the requirements? Is this just an exercise? And I don't want you guys to waste your time. Because the other piece to applying to positions where you don't meet the qualifications is, I also don't want you guys to walk away with tons of declines. Because sometimes you're getting declines, not because you are not worthy of that role, it's just because that role was literally, created for graduating seniors or rising juniors. Or maybe that program doesn't take sophomores and doesn't take freshmen. So really look at the requirements for graduation date. It's going to make your life easier because that way you don't feel frustrated, and it's going to really help you apply for the right roles. So look at the requirements and then look at your resume. Does your resume reflect that? Ayana mentioned on what to include in your resume as graduation date. So we see quite often, we'll see, your school listed, your major, and then we don't even know when you're graduating because you don't put class of, and what we're looking for is it spring of 2024 or is it fall of 2024? So we want to know, is this someone that we can put into a summer full-time program, an internship? Are they a December grad? So that many times comes into play when we are deciding how many folks we're putting forward. So really take a look at how you format that resume and give us that information. And then if it truly needs years of experience, then make sure that you're not just putting the years. So we hate to see, 2021 to 2022. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that maybe you worked there December of 2021, it was seasonal, and then you only worked until January or February of 2022? It's really only maybe three months max, but you might have thought, well, I'm going to put 2021 to 2022, and maybe they think it's a whole year. Remember I mentioned we knock you out? If I can't tell that it's a full year, you are in my quick knockouts. So we don't even go back to, and because of the large volume of resumes that come in, that recruiter's not going to pick up the phone and say, hey, Ayana, I was wondering, did you mean to put December of 2021 to January, or is it a full year? We're going to make the assumption that, you were hoping the recruiter wouldn't look. Well, the recruiter's going to knock you out, right? So now you're frustrated because you're like, why am I getting all these declines? And recruiters really look at that. And then the other piece to it is if you are working seasonal work, it is okay to have seasonal work. You could put in parentheses, seasonal, right? Because then as a recruiter, I can see, okay, they work every summer, they work every winter break. And if I'm looking for full years of experience, I'm going to look at, okay, he did 3 summers. Okay, that alone takes me up to 9 months. And then I'm looking at what winter work did you do? I then calculate that. Okay, great. We've got a whole year if I calculate everything together, right? But if I don't know and I'm just seeing years, we're going to knock you out. So those are really important things because it's going to create less frustration on you so that you don't get declines just for no reason or wonder, why am I getting declined? I'm applying everywhere. Okay. Now, you'll see on a job description, desired qualifications and required. So one of the reasons that I want you to really take note of the desired, and I want you to think about how many of those desired do I list on my resume? When you're a college student, and if you're applying to an internship or you're applying to an entry level role, many times you're going to see very limited experience, right? It might have 6 months. Internships might say 3 months of experience. So they're not asking for a lot of experience. So that's great, right? Well, on the flip side, think about how many kids go to school, how many, ASU alone, one of the largest schools, right? That means all your peers meet the same qualifications. So you might think, well, I qualify. Why am I not getting called? Because now that recruiter says, well, out of this 100 resumes, all of them qualify for the required qualifications. Now let me see how many qualify for the desired. So now I'm going to go down and go, okay, this person meets 4 out of the 5. This person meets 5 out of the 5. So that's why it's very important that you look at that job description and then tweak your resume. Because nowadays we see volume, and now when we see volume, we are looking for quality. And, I can't stress enough, if I don't see that, you're easily going to go down to my no pile. And if you go into my maybe pile, I may or may not come back to it, because quite frankly, we've got some really sharp students out there and that quality just comes through. So very rarely do we have to go to our alternate list. Okay, so I hope that helps. Now let's go and see what a resume looks like when you look at it different level. So Ayana mentioned 1-page resumes. You guys will be surprised how many college students submit a 3 to 4 page resume. So what you don't want to do is don't give us a laundry list of all your courses and everything you're taking. There's no reason for you to attach a transcript. So you should really, about your 10 years of work experience, so start creeping into the second page resume. Anything before 10 years, you should stick to 1 page. And the resume you're seeing here is the exact same candidate, exact same information. The major difference is how they formatted it. So we call it white space. So the first resume Katie has, she's got some white space on the top right, because she put her contact information line by line, right? So every line has her name, her current address, her permanent address, and then her phone number. Now she's got white space. Now, Katie, depending on how, what she's including in her bullet points, may have crept up to that second page because she took up 3 lines at the very top that she could have used. And sometimes, you're like, oh, I'm trying to print it and then just 2 lines go into that second page. So now I feel compelled to try to stretch it because I don't want that second page to only have 2 lines, okay? So what you wanna do is format your header so that it actually has your address information. You can have your current and permanent on the same line. And then, your contact information and email on your 3rd line. So you really shouldn't need a lot for your contact information. What we see nowadays is a lot of times people will make their headers really big because they'll have their LinkedIn information and then they'll have a QR code. We do find LinkedIn helpful, but most companies don't go into your LinkedIn. So, do some research, find out, some companies do like it, some don't. And if that's going to take you into, into that second page, then eliminate that. Okay, so just kind of do that. And then the other thing that you look at is your margins. So use your entire margins of your resume, because Katie has the exact same information. The only difference is that little white space at the very end makes a big difference. So how you present it, if you read her bullet points on the resume that has some white space are very basic bullet points. But because she expanded her margins, she needed a little bit more space. So now she's able to be more succinct and be more directive and use those action words in those bullet points. So if you want, please take a screenshot. And I also have a resume template that I'm happy to share. So if anybody reaches out to me, happy to email it to you as well. But as an entry-level resume, this should be a 1-pager. So when you look at the before and after, huge difference in just the way you format it. So play with your margins. Ayana mentioned your fonts. Make sure that you're doing that to make it a stronger presentation. Now, the second page shows you the example of a professional resume. In this case, it's still a 1-page resume, but the difference is that, we're taking out some color here, okay? The other piece to it, guys, when you don't use just black, sometimes as a recruiter, sometimes I might be making copies because maybe we're doing in-person interviews and then I'm making interview packets for the managers. Well, red doesn't copy very well. So now all of a sudden, Taylor, it becomes a very faint Taylor, So color for us is actually a hindrance, so avoid using any color on your resumes. Now, Taylor was able to, use her entire margins, make sure she put the same information, but in her case, she's also using more action words and being more descriptive in her bullet points. Exact same candidate, and it's just the way you present yourself, right? So it's just like going to Sunday school, right? You don't show up, in your jeans and t-shirts. You're going to wear your Sunday best. Your resume is your Sunday best, okay? So make sure that it is. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Now that you've done that, you're going to get ready for the job search. And I'm going to do a little plug because I know their next Beyond webinar is about interviewing. And I strongly encourage you that you take this time to work on that resume, because when the next webinar comes through for our interviewing workshop, it's going to make sense. It's going to help you connect those dots, because now you realize all the great work that you've done on your resume is going to help you present that in the interview. So we know you're doing great. We know you're doing great things on campuses through your partnerships, through your volunteer work, through your work. Now help convey that because you're ready for your job search. So I know it's a lot of information, and I hope we have tons of questions coming through, because I think we're going to get ready to the Q&A. Are we there yet? Yes, we
Yeah,
are.
we're there.
Ruth, you timed it perfectly, and I think we've run through items in really short order. So we've got some really exciting questions I know that have come in, and let's bring Dr. Caroline Harper back to walk us through any of the Q&A. Dr. Harper, so many things to unearth in what the team has shared here. I especially love the discussions around the not using color on the resume and limiting it to one page. But Ruth, I've got a quick follow-up for you on this one. Let's say that you're in a creative role. Let's say that you're focusing on a marketing role, or you're focusing on a design role. How can I still show my creativity and not have put, pink and orange on it?
Yeah, that's a great call out, because I will say there's always exceptions to the rules, right?
Sure.
So yes, there is an exception to that rule. So if you're applying for a very creative role with even a creative company, right? The other piece to it is look at the job description, because sometimes they'll say, provide a copy of your previous work, right? So that might be adding a link to maybe social branding or some type of platform that you've worked on. And be selective, right? The other piece is don't put a bunch of graphics on the resume thinking that's going to be my work. They may be asking you to provide a link to, a sample of your work. So there are exceptions to a rule, but I would tell you that exception is like 5% versus 95% of the jobs out there.
Okay, very helpful, very helpful. Ayana, anything there? So I need to take the stars and the hearts off my resume, huh?
Yep, stars, the unicorns, and all of those funny emojis have to come off your resume. Exactly what Ruth said. I don't have anything additional to add. It's just that, again, you keep your resume as simple as you possibly can, with an exception if you're applying for a graphic design or some other kind of really techie role, that where you can play with it a little bit and they expect that. But again, it's got to still be able to be sent. It's got to be able to look good in a PDF format, still minimize some of those colors, because again, you're thinking about compatibility issues.
I love that. And those are certainly things that you can spotlight in a portfolio that you can share with your follow-up notes that go to the folks that interview you, or bring those things up in the interview process. So, all right, Dr.
Exactly.
Harper, I got all the notes now. I know how to interview the next time. Let's give it to you for this amazing Q&A.
Well, I gotta say that was great, because listen, as long as I worked, I had no clue about the color issue. I was like, wait, what? I always thought like that was the cool thing to do. Not that I do it and I've had not done it, but I always thought like that was the trend, right? That you have something that pops and you can see it, but yeah, we forget about, oh, it's got to show up on a copy so that people can see it. Didn't know that. So thank you for sharing that. But one of the questions that first came up was just to clarify on the do's and don'ts. When we talk about our personal experience or a little bit about who we are there some general guidelines on one side it said we shouldn't share personal information, but are there some things that are maybe personally related that could tie into a job, or is there some kind of guideline as to when and what we should share about ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, there is such a thing as TMI on a resume. So again, your hobbies, we want to see your personality. And so things like I have a epidemiology background, sports management background as well. So anything around, me getting into talking about wellness, well-being, being into mindfulness, joining those kinds of organizations, yoga, running, those things fit within what I'm trying to apply to. I wouldn't necessarily put in reading or long walks with my dog, and I'm an Aries. Those kinds of things I would keep out of the resume. So again, if I'm into technology and I developed my own app, I definitely want that in my resume, because again, it showcases that not only do I find this as a point in my career, but I actually enjoy it. So my profession somewhat mirrors my passion. And so that's a great way to think about adding in the professional, your personal kind of hobbies and information. Ruth, anything to add with that?
Yeah, another thing that I would add is, I don't see it a lot, but I sometimes will, don't list marital status. I sometimes will see single, because I think people want to convey I'm open to relocation. So there's a difference. Don't put single, just put open to relocation, right? So try to stay away from anything that would quite frankly, in an interview, it's illegal to ask, right? So marital status, completely leave it out. If you have kids, leave it out. That's not something you're
Yeah.
discussing. So, really think of those things. Like Ayanna said, right? You don't want to give us a laundry list of, I will say, funny story. We do see Netflixing a lot on resumes. Don't put that as a hobby. Make it a hobby that conveys your participation in things, volunteerism, passions. Look, I love a good binge every so often, but that shouldn't be on your resume.
Oh, you did say it's like dating, so
It is like dating. It is. It is like dating.
thank you for clarifying on that one.
Sure.
Another question, which you all talked about a little bit, touched on it a little bit earlier, was just kind of making the transition. That sometimes we'll take roles professionally, might not be what we're trying to do long term, but it might be what's available. Can you talk a little bit more about how do you make the transition? So, for example, I had a student who one summer worked at Foot Locker and then really kind of got focused and figured out what she wanted to do with her life and her major, and then ended up getting an internship working with infant mortality. It was an organization that really dealt with infant mortality. And I worked with her on kind of how to transition that skill set, and really was about customer service. But how do you really make that transition from like a job that that you can get because it's available, and then you transition that skill set into something that maybe an employer might want to look at, or a recruiter?
Yeah, I'll quickly start, and then Ruth, you take over. It's the key word is transferable skills. So whatever you learned at working at Foot Locker, utilize those skills and think about it. What are those skills that were useful from when you worked at Foot Locker that will now transition you over into a career in healthcare or health management, which seems like where your student kind of transitioned into. So going from, like, I started in, again, population health management, had 15 years of experience in that. And so to transition into talent acquisition, targeted sourcing, I had to showcase my transferable skills that I learned consulting and project management from that one side of my career, that it would still allow me to be successful in this new role that I'm sitting in. Ruth, take over.
Yeah, and I will add to that, it's owning, making sure that you're proud of that work. I have a mentor who, when she became my manager at one point, and she used to always say, I will hire anyone that has worked fast food. If I see Burger King or McDonald's, because she worked at Burger King all through college, if I see Burger King, they're hired, because she understood that client-facing work is one of the toughest, right? So be very proud of the fact that you're working in a fast-paced environment, you're working with clients. Anyone who can work with clients and does it very well is going to be able to transition those skills. So be very, own that and really be very proud. And kind of own it as a badge of courage, right? This is what I bring to the table. So if you understand that, it's going to be easier conveying it on your resume, because you're like, okay, I worked with difficult clients. I was responsible for sales. I was responsible for leading a team. So you have kind of almost write your accomplishments, and then say, okay, all these accomplishments are transferable skills. And then when you go into that interview, really own it.
Fantastic, thanks. You all talked a little bit about framing your work experience. So you mentioned, like, even if you work seasonal jobs, right? And you've done the same place over and over and over again, say 2 or 3 summers or 2 or 3 winter breaks, that obviously shows consistency, right? That you're working well enough that people want to rehire you, which is a desirable skill. So as you're talking about that, one of the questions that comes up is it necessary to do a cover letter?
Good question. So cover letters are not required. And I will tell you that if you use the simple tip of putting seasonal, a recruiter understands what that means, right? Now, where you should use a cover letter is if, for example, maybe you've been in retail management for 10 years, and now you're thinking of transitioning from retail into maybe financial services. So someone might think it's a really big shift. And I say that because they think, but recruiters know those transferable skills. So know that many times a recruiter doesn't need that cover letter to know that you're going to be able to transition those skills. I would say cover letters typically are more helpful when there is maybe a gap. Maybe a gap in employment, maybe somebody took, maybe 3 years to, maybe take a medical leave, maybe they took a sabbatical to, take some courses. Maybe that's when you explain it. To be honest, because a recruiter only takes, that minute or less than a minute to read a resume, they're going to go first to the skills and then to the cover letter. Fully transparent, I see cover letters all the time. I go to the resume first. If I like the resume, then I'll read the cover letter. But if the resume wasn't good, I don't even go to the cover letter.
All right, thanks. Ayana?
Nothing additional to add on that. Ruth was perfect.
So one
Ayana.
of the questions, as you talk about kind of that experience. So what if I am a student, I am freshman or sophomore, looking for my first experience. I've figured out what courses matter and what's relevant, but I really don't have a lot. So is it okay to add like things that I've done in high school? Should I use that, or does it have to be only college level things that I list?
Yeah, so you can definitely go back to your high school work because we know you're a freshman. So it's just been a few months since you came in from your high school. And then the other piece to it is the one thing that I do see some students, I recently interviewed a student who we got to the very end of the interview and I said, is there anything else you'd like to add? And he said, oh, I also run my own landscaping business. My aunt's a realtor, so she hires me to go clean up every property she's selling. And I now have a business and I have a crew. And I said, why is that not on your resume? And he said, well, because it has nothing to do with financial services. And I said, well, actually it does. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, well, first of all, you manage a crew. He had talked about, he built his business by making marketing flyers and going down his neighborhood, and now has, customers that come to him often aside from his aunt. So all that is business, right? But in his head, it was landscaping. So he's like, well, it's a landscaping business. It has nothing to do with financial services. So when you think back to your your high school experience, many of you worked the concession stands at the football game. Many of you were in student council. You did fundraising. All those are things that you can, bring to your resume and then actually use in your interview as well.
Yeah, again, nothing additional. She nailed it. Absolutely.
Last question really kind of deals with some of what you're saying, right? Where sometimes we think of things that aren't very important, but they actually are kind of who we are at the core.
Yeah.
How important is it to really talk about personality? So for example, I like to think of myself as kind of the person who can build consensus because I'm a team player, right? But that really is kind of my personality. How important is it to put that in a resume, and how do we actually do that to where it really comes across to a recruiter?
I'll start, and then Ruth, you can jump in. Again, you have to be strategic about what you put on your resume. Again, we only look at it for 30 to 60 seconds. And so it's important to showcase your personality, but it's not as important, or here, I'll say it this way. You can showcase your personality by using those action verbs, that action slide that Ruth had you all take a picture of, because it really shows where your leadership skills were. It shows where your team player personality comes into play, managed or worked with a group of team members or collaborated with, or something that shows that you were able to get buy-in from your team and lead the project from start to finish. Or that's how you can showcase your personality without having to have I've seen it in like your skill set, team player, hard worker, open to feedback, those kinds of things. That's nice to have it over there, but again, I can also find it and see it in the resume itself.
Yeah, and the one thing I will add, and I didn't point this out when we were showing the resumes. So in the past, people used to use objective, right? Looking to be, and then they would just, give us a sentence or two of what their objective is to be hired. Now what we're seeing more is summary of qualifications. So they've replaced the objective statement, and now you can do a summary of qualifications. So if one of your top qualifications is leading and collaborating successful teams, is, call that out, right? Now it's a I hate to constantly use this, but it's your badge, right? It's one of your badge that you've earned. It's a merit, successful, leader of, or I'm trying to think of like the best way to put it, but something around maybe strong collaboration skills. But you want to call it out in your talents versus, and actually, let me say, summary qualifications on the top of it as talents, and then make sure I can see it in the resume, right? Because that is one quick call out that I will get out. I sometimes read it and somebody might say, I've seen maybe passionate D&I consultant, but I don't see anything in the resume that actually reflects D&I, right? So I might have a passion for D&I, but if my work experience doesn't show that, then maybe it's just something that I'm committed to and certainly, want to champion, but I couldn't really speak to it. So if you do summary of qualifications and you list that one of kind of an item that you're saying, this is what I'm really passionate about, and it is a attribute that I'm proud of, then make sure that I'm seeing it as well in the resume.
That's awesome. Thank you. I think that was the last question. So thank you both. Thank you, Ruth and Ayanna, for a fantastic presentation with a lot of nuggets that, as long as I've worked, I think all of us have worked for at least 20 years. And these are some things that I have yet to hear. I did not know until right now. I was now years old when I realized that they are not using objectives anymore. I did not know that. But thank you for everything that you put into this and for sharing so much of experience, but also helping us really think through where do we go next and how we do it best. One more question that just popped up. What's your take on a profile pic in a resume?
Interesting one there, Dr. Harper.
Ooh.
Yeah, I would take your photo off. You want to be recognized for the skills that you're representing. And unfortunately, human nature kicks in. Right. So I definitely say take your resume. Take your profile pic out. If someone truly wants to know what you look like, they're going to go find you on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Your resume, don't put it on there.
Agreed. That's what I was going to say. Have your link to LinkedIn or to that social branding website that you've created for them to get a good idea of who you are and what you stand for.
And as someone who's been told they have a face for radio, I don't put, I'm glad Dr. Harper got that joke. I don't have the photo on mine. Ladies, let me ask you a follow-up here. And Dr. Harper, I also want to get a closing thought from our panelists and one from you as well for anything else that may be there. What about the use of QR codes? Acceptable, not acceptable? Again, going back to where we started with the ability to spotlight a portfolio or a special project. Yay or nay on QR codes? And how do those work when you guys are kind of doing the crawls there to look through resumes?
Yeah. So I will tell you, be selective when you're doing a QR code. Two things to that. If you're doing a QR code, what is that taking it to, right? So make sure that you put some work in on what that link's going to take them to, right? So many times if it's a QR code to LinkedIn, then it's perfectly acceptable. But sometimes if it's your work, then make sure your work is really robust. And then I say be selective because it all depends on how it fits in your formatting.
Sure. Okay. Fair enough. Ayanna, benefits up, down there for QR codes and some of the tech pieces?
Yeah, definitely in the tech spaces. I know I've seen that quite a bit, adding in that QR code. But again, as Ruth said, be mindful of where it takes you. So if it takes you to a website, it's got to be clean and crisp. If it takes you to your LinkedIn page, it's got to be clean and crisp. If it takes you to Instagram or Facebook, you really got to start looking at all of your posts, because we'll sit there and we'll go through them. If we take the time to take a picture of the QR code, we're going to go through it. So just be mindful of what we're going to see once we do that.
Outstanding. Ladies, any closing thoughts that you want to give folks as we go to our reminders? It looks like we'll get everybody out of here a few minutes early today. So Ayanna, maybe while you've got the mic, give them a parting thought here, please.
Sure. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I want to hear from each and every one of you. If you have any questions, if you want us to review your resume, we are happy to do so. We'll take the time to do it. And so don't hesitate to reach out. And it's been a pleasure talking with you.
All right.
Ruth?
We appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. Please make sure you reach out to us on LinkedIn and leverage the resources. Obviously, we gave you information. There's so many different resources. And guys, you pay tuition, so use your career services on campus. They have many, many resources to help you build your resume. So make sure you're leveraging that as well.
All right. Ruth, Ayanna, great information there. Dr. Harper, anything else you want to leave with the audience here for today?
I learned the hard way that I used to hate doing resumes, particularly when I was an undergrad. I thought, oh, who cares? Just hire me already. But what I learned is it's a great opportunity to really do storytelling because people don't know you. It's a way to pick and choose and how you weave together what you bring to the table in a way that's really compelling. And you get good at it after a while. It also, the preparation for writing your resume makes the interview much easier. Right. When you put the time into writing all that out, it's much easier to rattle that off in an interview. So it is a really exciting thing to do. So I do encourage you to follow those steps, update it every semester because you're learning new things and take advantage of those opportunities. So I will tell you a funny story as well, Ayanna. I do know somebody who was looking for a job, had a QR code, working particularly in IT as a web developer. I scanned his QR code, which was a dead link.
Wow.
Exactly.
Not a good selling point.
Not a good thing.
So just make sure that you're accurate in what you're saying as you paint the picture of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. If you share it, it's fair game. It's fair game. Well, panelists, thank you all for the great information. Thank you also for the masterful facilitation there of the Q&A. And you heard it earlier, team. Our partners are happy to be able to connect in with you and are happy to be able to continue the conversations on LinkedIn relative to those kinds of areas. So really good stuff in those spaces. All right, hey team, as we close out with items here for today, just some very, very quick reminders. We've got our great QR code, speaking of QR codes, that spotlights the work that we're doing around our, from a survey perspective. And so please scan that QR code. It'll take you over to a quick survey. You'll also get a soft copy of this. Angel Heyman and the team do an amazing job of this every year. In every broadcast, being able to get there. So take 5 minutes, give us feedback, tell us the things that you enjoyed about what we shared, and certainly let us know if there are some things that you want us to focus on in the days ahead. Hey, as we continue on, some final items, and I think the next one is focusing on the career pathways perspective. So we've got a couple of career events that are happening kind of as we speak and over the next couple of weeks. We've got a great HBCU Expo that's taking place virtually on March the 15th. We've also, shout out to our partners out in the California market, and things been very, very wet out there for them. But for our friends there at UC Merced, a great hiring and career fair that will be taking place again also on the 15th. And then can't forget about our friends at Johnson C. Smith University and what's going to be a really exciting session for them that's coming up on March the 22nd. For a career and virtual hiring event there. Second to the last slide, we'll just spotlight a couple of items here for you. Certainly, please make sure that you're getting connected into our other Beyond College webinars. Make sure you're accessing the playback that's available for the sessions that we hosted last year. You've got a really great information that's available there. Also, certainly want to spotlight the work that's happening around our Wells Fargo's career areas or Wells Fargo jobs page. Please bookmark that page. Join the talent community to be able to learn more about the resources that are available in those kinds of areas. And also a huge shout out. I'm happy to be joining today from from Charleston, South Carolina. And so we're fairly close to some of the military bases in this area of the country. And so huge shout out to all of our military partners that are on. And to our buddy, Sean Passmore and his team, they're doing amazing work relative to those that have served or actively serving now. Please make sure you get connected in with his team around the resources from a military recruiting perspective. All right, and as we close things out, I want to give a special thanks to all of our amazing partners for the amazing, exciting information that was shared today. Really feel like we're leaving today's session with some good information. So huge thanks to Ayanna and to Ruth Also to Dr. Harper and the entire JRF team for all the work that they're doing to staff this series. Dr. Harper, we got 3 down. You got 9 to go between now and November, and they keep getting better every single time. With that said, and also huge shout out to Tamika Lindsay. I know Tamika's still on with us. Tamika, thank you so much for all that you do, both on the HBCU side and just being a great partner in all of this great work. And she's also, I'm gonna shout her out, she's also the vice president of our Black and African American Employee Resource Network. Tamika, I dropped your information into the chat. I know you may not be on the speaker line anymore, but dropped your LinkedIn information into the chat so some scholars may be reaching out. With that said, we're gonna give you guys back 18 minutes. Please don't miss out on the March 23rd webinar. It's really part 2 of everything that we've discussed here for today. So join us for the discussion around success in job interviews. You can scan that QR code. It'll take you over, post and share this information with others that may benefit from it as well. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. March Madness is almost here. You all are also heading off to spring breaks and all kinds of things. So please, let's make the best decisions that we can in those things. Enjoy some downtime where you can. And then let's get rejuvenated and be ready to go here for our final session here for the month of March. With that said, till next time, Dewey Norwood and team signing off. We'll talk soon, everybody. Good night.